You're on CY Interview.
I'm Chris Shandik, featured columnist Jay Billstein is with me. Today on CY Interview, we welcome an all-around performing artist, actress, comedian, host, whatever you want to call her. She's one of the great artists on the Las Vegas Strip in the show Sex Tips for Straight Women from a Gay Man at Paris Las Vegas Hotel and Casino. Due to the coronavirus pandemic, many of the Las Vegas entertainers and performers who you see on the Las Vegas Strip every night are coming up with new professions in the meantime until we can get back to live performing. Today we welcome MaKenzie Fly, who is doing a yoga online classes for people at her website, flyfearlessyoga.com. MaKenzie, thanks so much for joining us today on CY Interview. It's nice to speak with you again, a past CY Interview guest.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
Well, I enjoy you and your husband Colin's work and your work in Sex Tips. You were so funny last year when we saw you in person at Paris Las Vegas Hotel and Casino. And really, we're just really talking because, as you know, I'm sure you and many of your other performing artists, friends in the entertainment community here in Las Vegas, all of you are trying to come up with different ways to make money, be focused on other things, waiting for live performing to start again. So tell me, how long have you been involved with yoga? Tell me about the website. Tell me what you're planning on doing that just launched this week.
Okay, well, as we all are, and like you kind of alluded and said, it's just kind of taking a pivot with your business, really. So I am fortunate in the sense that I have been teaching yoga now for almost 10 years, and it's been a nice pairing and partner alongside my performance, and always has been. I got my first yoga teacher training when I was in college, and was teaching in college and have been teaching all throughout my professional career. So at least I kind of had, it was never necessarily like a backup plan, but it was just something that I did alongside. So it's been beautiful. I've been so thankful that I've had this to kind of help not only other people, but more importantly, like keep me sane. You know, at least yoga is something that stresses, you know, wellness and kind of giving you the space to process your emotions and try to deal with them in a healthy way. So it's been great because yoga has, you know, saved me on multiple occasions, but especially during this pandemic, trying to figure out how I'm feeling and not get too down in the dumps and lost in all of your emotions and work with and ultimately through them. So I feel very blessed that not only that I have yoga, but that I'm able to share it in a virtual way. So thank God for the internet.
Question. So here's what I would say to you. Two quick things, and then I'm going to throw it to Jay. One, did you continue to teach yoga? Have you continued to teach yoga throughout the pandemic? And is the website just kind of the last point where you realize, well, I can put this all together in one place so people can be more accessible to it?
That's a good question. I've always taught, you know, in person. I mostly teach at Lifetime Athletic Green Valley location here in Vegas. But once everything shut down, I moved to YouTube and was kind of just streaming classes live on YouTube and then also Instagram, and was offering it just as like a, hey, I'm doing this, please join me. It was never a means really to make money, but really just to help us have something to do with everybody being stuck inside. And once things started to kind of open up and normalize, I kept and continued on with YouTube. And then the website, like you said, was just a kind of place to bring everything together and then also make it easier for people to contact me if they wanted to work individually or privately or join me in group Zoom classes and just make it a bit more of a professional experience for people.
Go to flyfearlessyoga.com to find out more information about MaKenzie Fly's yoga, her entire career, who she is. Before I throw it to Jay, one last question. You know, being at the Paris Las Vegas Hotel and Casino and Sex Tips, do you miss live performing, and what do you miss, and how much has the yoga helped from the missing of the performing?
Oh man, of course I miss performance. I miss all the daily interactions, you know, of going to work and asking people how their day is, and just you know, the camaraderie of just being around other people, of course. And then sometimes too, yoga teaching almost feels like a miniature performance because you go somewhere and you set a space for someone, you set the stage, even though it's not a play at the Paris Hotel and much different topic than Sex Tips for Straight Women from a Gay Man than doing a yoga class, but it still is the same. You know, it's all about creating space. So whether you're creating space for there to be a comedy play or creating space for people to try to achieve the feeling of yoga, the feeling of peace, you're still creating a space for people to have an experience. So they feel the same to me, even though they can seem very different. They feel the same as far as a facilitator, as far as like a performer or teacher. It's all about just making space. So,
well, when the pandemic ends, everyone needs to go see you at Sextus because you are so seriously hilarious in a serious, conservative way, but you are funny in your own right, Jay.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
So MaKenzie, tell me, what brought you to yoga originally?
Okay. Well, I grew up in Oklahoma, so I had no exposure to yoga until I was about 15 or 16. I was training in North Carolina. I was visiting my aunt, actually. This is kind of when I started to take musical theater very seriously, when I discovered that you could go to school for musical theater. So I had kind of decided that I wanted to go to college for musical theater and dance, and so I was like, oh gosh, I got to kind of, get my act together and figure out my whole audition. And my aunt is a ballet teacher in North Carolina. So while I was training at this very intensive ballet program over the summer, I encountered my first yoga studio. So while I was dancing all day, at night I would go to this yoga studio, which is kind of insane when I think back on it. It's a lot of taxing on the body. But so that was my first exposure, and I remember kind of hating it the first time. I tried a Bikram yoga class, which for people who've never tried it, it is madness. You're in this like 110-degree room. They basically tell you not to leave, and you do like 26 postures in a row, which takes like an hour and a half, and they're very, very athletic, challenging postures. So I remember thinking, like, this is what crazy people do. Like, this is a lot. So that was my first experience, but something in it stuck because I just never, ever stopped. I mean, it's been the one thing so consistent for me. My practice isn't that intense every day. I mean, you can tailor it and change it, which is one of the beautiful things, is that it could be pretty intense or it could be nice and light. It's really kind of what you put in, you get back. So, yeah, that's where I first tried it, and then, I guess I found myself here, still doing it somehow.
Well, I find your background incredibly interesting, intriguing, specifically for me because I've spent a lifetime in athletics. And when I was coming out of New York University, I got a job as a personal trainer back in the days when nobody ever heard of a personal trainer. And this was back in the days when Noah was trying to pair animals together and herd them onto his boat. So it was a while ago. Not only did nobody even hear of a personal trainer, there were like no certification organizations like, you're going to do what exactly? But anyway, I was working this health club in Greenwich Village, and a huge percentage of my coworkers were dancers, some with classical ballet training and all, and here I was, not a dancer, having the grace and fluidity of movement, though, and a general joie de vivre for life that would be akin to Frankenstein's monster. But I, was doing powerlifting and, what's sometimes referred to as the heavy sports, kind of, I don't know, would have thought of as, maybe a high level of work output and maybe a lower level of skill, which I think kind of suits me because I don't see myself as very skillful. But these women, and there was one guy, he competed in long-distance bike racing, but these women were phenomenal, and I learned so much from them about the body and movement, so I'm going to throw some things out to you. Because you've got a background in dance and ballet and yoga and so forth. Any of these names resonate with you? You mentioned hot yoga. Of course, that's, if I recall correctly, Bikram Chowdhury. I hope I'm not destroying his name. But going from memory. And I think he's got some little, shouldn't say little, some things that were controversial at some point in time. But that's not the issue right now. Joseph Pilates.
Of course.
A fellow by the name of Frederick Alexander.
Yes.
Ida Rolf, hailing from my great city, New York City, the city that never sleeps, the city so nice they named it twice. Ida Rolf from the Bronx, and a gentleman from Israel by the name of Moshe Feldenkrais. Familiar with these folks? Have any influence on what you do? And by the way, for people without your background, so we've got there hot yoga, Pilates, the Alexander technique, Rolfing, and the Feldenkrais technique. So
oh, yeah.
what does this mean to you, to your practice, to movement, and to yoga?
Beautiful. I mean, I'm impressed. You just dropped a huge array of important...
I'm like a movement name dropper.
Yeah, you really are. Well, I mean, all of them are just interested in the way the body moves, right, and making connection with, you know, all of your dimensions, your mental body, your energy body, your emotional body, and your actual physical body. So I think that it's kind of just a testament of how many different roads there are that kind of lead to the same place. And all my exposure to each one of those is that there's validity in each one of them. Each one has, you know, something of value to bring to you. But in my experience, they've all kind of led to that sort of same thing. And the one that has interested me the most is, of course, the yoga, because that's what I do. So I can't speak, you know, in depth of all of them aside from the yoga, but they all are just fascinating. And then kind of when you get to the essence of it, you're like, oh, so this could be, you know, another way that I could do what this guy is saying. It's just a different kind of technique of arriving at the same place. So just generally speaking, when I look at all of those, that's kind of my first thing. But it's interesting that you bring up the not the conspiracy, but the, what's the word, with Bikram?
Less than palatable allegations that were made.
Yes.
I don't really know about them, but I know that there were some things that came up. But I do know certain weightlifters, by the way, who do hot yoga and would swear by it as kind of a restorative.
Yeah.
But they said it was brutal.
It is tough, and that's the thing that I think that kept me interested, or really, you know, it became, it's not what's easy that makes you stay. It's when you're really, really challenged, and something that's like when it's really difficult, that's what keeps bringing you back. So for me, I had all this dance and performance background, so I had a fair bit of flexibility, but man, my strength was pitiful. I just couldn't, you know, do, you know, planks or push-ups or anything like that, and I had no idea that yoga could incorporate such strength, stamina, and resilience in building, not only of like your physical body, but just really testing the boundaries of your mind, because everything comes from your mind and what you believe is possible. So as far as the mental training that comes with yoga, I think that that's what keeps it exciting and interesting, because you're changing every day. You're changing breath to breath. You know, it depends on what you ate, what you did the day before, how much focus you have in that moment. So even though you may be doing the same yoga practice every day, I just find it so endlessly and deliciously interesting, because you're evolving all the time. So it's always different. And it's the challenge to accept yourself every day.
Well, besides just, you know, trying to sound halfway like I know something about movement, one of the reasons I brought up these names is for specifically the reason, and you, I think, will do a phenomenal business, because, at least from the little I know, you get it. The entire idea of the mind-body connection, you know, too many of us see ourselves as pieces, right? Well, in my mind as opposed to my body, or, you know, my spirit, but we're not divisible. We're indivisible. Yes, it's true. We live in this wonderful age where, you know, God forbid you need a knee or hip replacement. It's there for you. But we're indivisible beings. And I think what all that work has in common, what you're doing is, there is at the root of it a mind-body connection. And I remember years ago somebody said to me, an actor like yourself, they said, hey, take this, come on in and sit in our voice class. And I said, okay, why not? I do public speaking for you. I'll sit on our voice class with you. And when they started, they were all tapping their chests, and they were going, and they were kind of beating their chest, and I was like, what's all this, you know, and I'm looking around and kind of looking for the exit, and what's all this about? What's all this chest beating? And I said, my friend stopped and said, here, why don't you try it? And I said, what is it for? Well, it loosens you up before you have to speak. And this person said, be careful, you may start to cry. And I said, we were in New York, so I'm going to clean it up. I said, get out of town, without saying get out of town, but I used code language for get out of town. And short words, small words to say get out of town. And all of a sudden I started crying. And I was like, what on earth is this? And so I did maybe not a deep dive, but a bit of a dive into, voice training and all this movement training and all, and it really reaffirmed to me the notion of a mind-body connection. And so if we could take it home to that, are you going to be working right now with what you do in yoga to help to specifically relieve stress and specifically help people who are put upon in a way that arguably human beings haven't been put upon in 100 years with the pandemic we're going through?
That's amazing. First of all, thank you for sharing such an inspiring story of experience from just your own life. That's pretty cool. It's making me think of just how everything is rhythm, how everything is vibration, everything is sound, and, of course, music is all about kind of syncing and linking back up to a rhythm that feels good. And everything is kind of like that, whether you're chopping a tomato or playing a violin. Like if you look at somebody who's really put in the hours and has come to that sort of mastery level, there's a rhythm. Even in the way of like a doctor performing a surgery, there's just a pace, an even pace of perfect performance. So it's all kind of comes down to that. And that's really like where the healing experience comes from, is when you quiet the noise, when you stop overthinking, and when you kind of dip back into rhythmicity. So that's the thing that's addicting. That's the thing that feels good. And so when you create that space for somebody to, like we were saying, feel their body and feel their breath, everything else kind of drowns out, and you tune in. That's what they call being in like the flow state. That's what you call being in sync, when you just feel like it's all jiving, when it's going right. And that kind of experience opens up this floodgate and kind of helps relieve and release areas of stuckness. So then you kind of have this like flushing out sensation, whether it's quite physically, like clearing out some sort of blockage or obstruction that can be very cleansing to the system, or if it's energetically, like that sort of moment where you feel like all of a sudden you're crying for no reason, like these emotions are just kind of bubbling up to the surface. It's because of some sort of effort or work that you've put in to remind yourself or resync yourself into a rhythm. Because whenever we get out of rhythm is when we experience dis-ease. So coming back to some sort of rhythmicity, whether it's, like I said, it doesn't necessarily have to be in the ways that we think of like singing and dancing. Like there's rhythm in everything if you just kind of take some time to look at it in a different way. So that's kind of been my experience. It's like just taking some time to return, to simplify, to almost slow down. And when you do that, you can experience those sort of transformative experiences that you're talking about.
It's so interesting how different kind of movement activates different kind of emotions, I've found, right? So certain type of sports are, and I won't try to sound smart, I'll just say certain type of sports are, it's that, you're almost accessing anger. You're almost accessing anger, and I have to say, shamefully, to an extent, growing up in New York when I did, I guess everybody, I was coming up in New York through the 70s. It was a very dangerous, very forbidding, very foreboding place. That all of us who were coming up at that time probably didn't even see it that way, because that's where we were coming up, right? So that's all we knew, and it's all you know. And so, these kind of sporting endeavors, right? You get up at the bat in baseball, you got to let it rip and all that. And I wasn't really introduced to any kinds of concepts of flow, as you just so well stated, MaKenzie, until my 20s. And it was so interesting how it tapped into different kinds of emotions, which I think a lot of guys, I don't know if it's still the case, don't want to admit to. Fear, insecurity, sorrow, right? Those don't sound like, typical guy things. Hey, Jay, talk to us about your sorrow, your sadness, and your vulnerability. No. From where I came from, everybody was kind of armored up and nothing bothers me, and of course it's all baloney. And so I think there's something tremendously restorative about what you're doing, particularly at this time, because this is what's needed. And you know, unfortunately, we live in a country where our healthcare system is not a healthcare system, it's a sick care system. Now, you're not presenting yourself as a doctor, you're not presenting yourself as an allied health professional, but I believe that yoga by its nature is restorative not only to body but to mind. Leslie Bega, who I interviewed many years ago, who was very, very schooled in yoga, and she was a well-known actress on The Sopranos and on CSI and so forth. In an interview I had with her, she said, the yogis say your flexibility of the spine is your flexibility of mind. And she said this to me many years ago, and I said, your flexibility of spine is your flexibility of mind. And I think it's really true. So you are doing God's work at a very, very key moment, I think. I truly do.
Wow. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I think it's more of a testament of just yoga is yoga, you know, and we're all just trying to be of service and ambassadors of passing on this truth in the best way we can. But you sparked a few things for me. So the shapes themselves, what yogis would call the asanas. Asanas meaning seat. It's basically, the shape itself gives you almost this seat to sit in, to feel and experience. A safe seat. So it's almost like you're giving yourself this opportunity to play in this shape and see if trying to do the shape, to participate or actively engage in the shape, stirs up any sort of emotions. So it kind of intentionally creates these conditions for emotions to arrive or arise. So that you have this opportunity to, in a safe way, practice how you'll respond when you get stimulated or triggered. So say, for example, you're doing like a warrior one, and you do almost like a lunge in one leg, and you lift your arms above your head, and you start to feel a bit of a back bend. So you're kind of giving your nervous system this chance to say, okay, here I am in the shape. How do I feel? And notice all of your feelings. And it might be, you know, you're not there for very long, so you don't feel that much because the duration has a huge impact on kind of what you feel. Eventually, something's going to get hard. Like even holding your arm out in front of your body is okay for the first 5 minutes or so, but the longer you stay, the heavier it starts to feel. So the playtime kind of becomes in not necessarily doing the posture, but how long can you stay in something really kind of tells you how advanced you are on the practice. Not to say that you need to stay, you know, in a shape for 24 hours to be a yoga guide. I'm not saying that, but I am saying there's something to say about duration. So it no longer becomes about like what you can do, but how long you can maintain a steadiness of mind, a peace of mind. That's kind of when you know you're really getting stronger in your yoga muscles, not just in the muscles of your body, but in the muscles of your mind. Like how long can you remain? How long can you stay at the center of your effort, trying again and again to stay balanced and to stay calm.
Which is, for anybody who's ever taken a yoga class, and I have, is no small feat at all.
Yeah, no, not
even
at all.
Even if you're accomplished in certain other things, and I believe it does things for the body and mind that few other practices do, and so I think this is just absolutely great what you're doing. Final question, and I probably blow all these names because I'm just not too good at pronouncing things unless you want to hear the English language butchered, but I guess it's called Pranayama. Am I getting that right? Yoga breathing?
Pretty good. Yeah, Pranayama.
There was a book by a doctor by the name of Herbert Benson, MD, that came out some time ago called The Relaxation Response. He was a doctor at Harvard. He may still be. And he reduced meditation down into some very, very simple steps, kind of demystified it. And if I recall correctly from reading the book, and I use the practice, and I can literally drop my blood pressure and my heart rate and all these kinds of things doing the relaxation response. I've been doing it for some time. But there's supposedly all this kind of information about how it could have positive effect on health in terms of cholesterol, in terms of blood pressure, in terms of stress levels, and everything else. Do you find, at least simply from the breathing for a beginner, and something like pranayama, which itself is not an asana, right? It's yoga breathing, that just by getting somebody in tune with their breathing, you may be able to help bring them some de-stressing?
Absolutely, 100, 1,000%. It's funny because I hear students and people say all the time, they're like, I can just tell when I've been away from yoga. There's something that I can just tell is off, and it's that connection that you're talking about. So there's this phenomenon where really your respiration system is kind of one of those systems, or it is the only system in your body that you can both be aware of and then not aware of. So you can be aware that you're breathing, and then you can also be not aware that you're breathing, but your breathing keeps going for you. So the nervous system and the respiration system are very much intertwined and connected, so much so that your breathing can have an effect. So you can almost exploit that phenomenon. So if you're feeling a certain way, you can breathe in a certain way to induce a certain feeling. So they're almost like your emotion of anger has a way that it looks in your breath, and it also has a way that it manifests in your body. So if you want to combat your feeling of anger, you can use the tool of your breathing to stimulate that sort of relaxation response that you're talking about, to put you more in that rest and digest phase rather than fight and flight. So it's incredibly a useful tool, breathing for sure. I sometimes just say, like, if you're having one of those days where you don't feel like you can do much, just sit on your mat and breathe, and you'll still have a transformative experience. I mean, the breath is where all the power and magic is.
I couldn't agree more completely. I mean, often what I do, if I'm really stressed, I find a quiet place to sit down. I sit on a comfortable chair where my arms are supported. I'm not on a mat. I'm not on the floor. I close my eyes. I breathe slowly in through the nose, and then I let it out through the mouth, and I don't clock myself, but I attempt to do that. I have a word. I happen to like the word one, so in my mind, I just keep repeating one. And I do my breathing, and if thoughts pop into my head, I just let them go. I don't fight them being there. They just, if they stay, they stay. If they go, they go. And eventually, I just feel a heck of a lot better, and it is completely transformative. It's a book I read not all that long ago. I think it was called The Oxygen Advantage by Patrick McKean. I don't know if you know it. That was very interesting. There's also a fella out there, do they call him the Iceman? A guy who does all kinds of breathing. Right. He got a lot of press in the last couple of years. Breathing is big. And the reason I bring that up also is you're going to be doing this work on platforms like Zoom and so forth.
Yep.
Some people may say, well, what am I going to be able to get out of it, if I don't have my yogi standing over me, if I don't have an instructor right there? But I got to tell you, just what you said, simply the breathing part, that coaching of yoga breathing, I think that anybody in almost any health status, as long as they've got the okay of a qualified physician, and you're not taking that responsibility for anyone, but as long as somebody's cleared to do exercise, simply the breathing alone, I think, would be worth God knows what in these very trying times. I think you're just doing tremendous stuff, and I could keep you on here all night and the next day just talking movement and breathing, because what else is life but movement and breathing, really, if you think about it.
That's so great about yoga, is that it's like you're just using the tools of your own body. Like, you don't have to go out and purchase all these things. You don't really even need a yoga mat. You're using all the faculties that are already in your back pocket, breath and your body. So it's incredibly accessible because you don't have to think outside yourself. And yes, a guide is wonderful, but ultimately your breath is your greatest teacher, as long as people learn how to lean in breath. So I appreciate that, and I just want, help in any way that I can. So I'm grateful to have a way that people can reach me. I'm grateful to you guys' help for helping me spread the word. So if that's what you're interested in, that's what I'm here for.
Well, you've given me another great quote. Your yoga. What did you say? Your breath is your best teacher. That's phenomenal.
Yeah.
I thank you. I thank you, MaKenzie. I thank you for coming on with us, and you're great. And I'm sure, Chris, you'll mention again how everybody can find MaKenzie to get what I would consider to be her vital services at this very, very stressful time. Chris?
Go to flyfearlessyoga.com, www.flyfearlessyoga.com. A link will be at the bottom of this CY interview where you're listening on our website right now. So for all-around entertainer MaKenzie Fly, featured columnist Jay Billstein, and CY interview, I'm Chris Shinnick.